Okay, it's right on 12 o'clock now, and I don't want to hold anyone up, so we will get started. I'd like to thank you all so much for coming along today to our second online volunteer tutor workshop. This is the second time we've repeated this workshop this week, and we really appreciate you taking the time to come on in and have this session with our teacher, Rebecca. Just a couple of bits of housekeeping, please, for everyone. We will have question time at the end, and there'll be an opportunity to ask questions to myself or to Rebecca. There's also a chat pod that will open. So if you do have a quick question, Athena and I will be looking after the chat pod, and we can answer quick questions for you there as well. I'll show you where that is. Yeah. This opportunity, as I mentioned, is great, and thank you so much for everyone who's been able to still connect with their students during COVID-19. We know it's certainly presented some challenges, but also some positives. Our program of volunteer tutoring has actually grown immensely during this period. We've had a lot of people who wanted to stay connected during self-isolation and who have come on board as online tutors. And we really do appreciate the time that everyone takes with their students. Thank you for your patience too while we've been processing all those applications, because that's certainly taken us some time to keep on top of that. This workshop is the second, as I've mentioned, that we're repeating this week, but we're also looking at creating many more online workshops throughout the year. And what we'll be doing today is we're recording this session, and we're going to make them available in a bank where you'll be able to access them as needed. So we will be creating future workshops on specific topics. And if you find that you need a bit more information, you'll be able to go back and look at a workshop that was delivered. Even if you weren't able to participate in the workshop, you will be able to go back and view that workshop at a future time to give yourself a little bit more information in a specific area if you needed that. Just to get the meeting started, and before I introduce our teacher, can everyone in the chat pod please write their name and the suburb or town of where they are sitting at the moment and where they're joining this meeting from? Fantastic. We've got people from all over, as far south as Albury so far. Quite a few in Sydney. I think I saw Nash's name too, and I'm pretty sure he's in Wagga Wagga, if he's down there as well. Lots of places. It's great to see how wide our group of volunteers go. And for your information, we've actually got 62 different nationalities within our volunteer pool. So we have an amazing wealth of culture and also knowledge and experience in many roles that people have outside this volunteering. And we really appreciate you being on board. So thank you for that. And I'd just like to hand over now to Rebecca Bradford, and she'll start the workshop. Thanks, Rebecca.
Thanks, Lisa. And welcome everyone to the workshop. So as Lisa mentioned, I'll first present the slides, and you're welcome to write any questions or comments in the chat pod as I'm going. At the end of the presentation, I'm really looking forward to, I can't actually see the chat pod as I'm doing this, but at the end, I'm looking forward to seeing everybody's faces and answering any questions that you've got. So I'll just move on to a bit of housekeeping. So I don't know how familiar everybody is with Microsoft Teams, but you'll see the floating bar that should be sort of on your screen somewhere. So for the presentation part, if you could please just mute your microphone and turn your camera off as well if you'd like to. You can, if you want to, you can, if you hover over the three dot points for more actions, a menu should pop up and you can turn on live captioning if you want to do that. And as Lisa mentioned, there's the chat pod as well, which you can access if you click on the little chat icon, which is between the dots and the participants. So that's a bit of housekeeping. Just moving on. So before I start, I'd like to do an acknowledgement of country. We would like to pay our respects and acknowledge the traditional custodians of all the lands on which this meeting is taking place, and pay our respects to elders both past, present and emerging. We would also like to acknowledge any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people in the meeting today. So I'm here in Ultimo, and the traditional owners of this land are the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. So if you want to write in the chat where you are today, that would be great. So just a little bit about myself before I get into the presentation. My name's Rebecca and I'm an AMEP teacher here at Ultimo TAFE. So I've got about 15 years teaching experience and about 7 years working in the AMEP. I'm really proud to be part of the AMEP. It's a fantastic program and thank you guys for supporting it as well. We work with just, wonderful people and amazing students who've just got really, varied and interesting backgrounds, and I think it's a really special program. I've also worked as a pathway guidance officer at Ultimo, and through this I give support to students through their AMEP journey in terms of support through their studies or personal support if they need it, or any, if they need referrals to any other services. And just before I get started, I just want to also acknowledge that I realise that there's lots of different levels of expertise out there. I know that some of you are, probably teachers or have been teachers. I also know that some of you have already started working with your students in your volunteer tutor sessions, and others, may not. So this presentation is basically about giving you some tips to engage your student. And also doing it through online learning, because this has been very new to me, and also I imagine it's new to a lot of us out there. So this presentation is basically covering the basics of engagement and online learning engagement. So I'd really like everybody, if I know that you've also got probably got lots of experience and or possibly not, or maybe just ideas. So if you want to add any tips or any comments in the chat pod, please do as I'm going through my slides. Okay, so first a bit of an overview. I'll be talking first a little bit about the difference between engaging online and engaging face-to-face. After that, a little bit about using technology, getting to know your student, setting expectations and boundaries for your sessions, some tips for engaging students online, a little bit about making corrections and homework, and also some really useful websites that I use for my classes. So the first thing I thought about was the question, is engaging online different from engaging face-to-face? So if you guys want to write your opinion in the chat now, that'd be really great. It's something that I've thought about a lot, and my personal experience and my answer to this question is basically yes and no. So engaging students, engagement is engagement whether it's face-to-face or online, and a lot of the techniques you use to engage can be adapted for online communication. But firstly, what is engagement? So engagement involves building a relationship and making a connection, generating interest and motivation, and creating opportunities for your student to learn. So as I said, engaging students is, it's really essential part of teaching and learning. And you can use face-to-face techniques, but with adaptations for online communication. So a few of the challenges for online engagement. This is what I've experienced, and I think a lot of teachers as well. So the number one challenge is obviously technology. So it's new to a lot of people, and it's been quite hard adapting to using technology to teach students and for them as well to be in a learning environment just through online work. Another challenge is the lack of personal contact. a big part of engagement is making that connection with your student and building a relationship. And it's obviously much harder to do that online. It takes a lot longer to get to know someone online compared to face-to-face. At least that's my experience. Another challenge with online engagement is cognitive load. So that's basically the mental stress of communicating online. Communicating online increases our cognitive load, and this is basically because our brains are working harder to process visual cues such as facial expressions, gestures, and body language. So these are things that we don't really think about when we're communicating face-to-face, but when we're doing this online, our brains are sort of go into overdrive to process this information. So a couple of little tips here for online communicating. Your sessions, I imagine, I think are an hour, and even just 1 hour of online, communication can be quite taxing. So definitely build in little mini breaks into your sessions. Stand up and stretch, move around, and I'll talk a little bit about screen sharing in the next slide. But definitely, I would encourage people to get familiar with sharing your screen, depending on which platform you're using for your sessions, and teach your student to do this as well, and take turns screen sharing. That can really break up the lesson and take a bit of the pressure off you. So moving on to using technology. So as I said, this is one of the biggest challenges. It's been hugely challenging for us. We've had to move all of our classes online, and we had to do it very quickly as well. I'd actually never imagined it would be possible to do that in such a short time, but we did it. And it was hugely challenging, but one of the positives has definitely been the opportunity to learn new skills. So both teachers and students have really increased their digital literacy in a huge way over this period, just because we basically had to. At Ultimo, we moved around 400 students to online classes from term 1 to term 2, and most of us had no idea how to do this, but we've all risen to the challenge, and it's been really, that part of it's been very positive. It's also been great that, as Lisa mentioned, that we're able to do this because it's for people who, especially in that first period of lockdown, people were quite isolated, and it was great that everyone had that opportunity to stay connected. So basically, my tips for using technology. Firstly, I know there's lots of platforms out there. Choose one that both you and your student are comfortable using. So we use Teams, and that's, it's great. Zoom's another one, FaceTime, Skype. One of the, what I would encourage you to do though is choose a platform that has a screen sharing function, because this just opens up lots of opportunities for engagement and communication with your student. Putting your camera on is obviously really important, so you can have that face-to-face interaction. Some people are a bit camera shy. Some students are camera shy. They sometimes don't like to show their face, but it's obviously, really important to do that. Another tip, definitely have a backup plan for when things go wrong, and establish this with your student from the start. So, obviously technology does go wrong quite frequently, but if you've got a plan in place, a phone call or an email, something that you can do if the technology is not working, that's a really good idea to do that. The other thing I would say is that if you're not familiar with technology and things like screen sharing and basically just using it, practice with a friend or family member first. Think about some activities that you might want to do with your student, and then you can just practice with someone first. It really helps. Definitely create a quiet space and encourage your student to do this. If you can invest in a good headset, that helps the sound quality. And obviously think about privacy as well. You want to be somewhere where you're not interrupted, and encourage your student to do that as well if possible. So that's using my tips for using technology. So an important part of keeping your student engaged is to to get to know them as quickly as possible. And, you know, as I said before, this is even more challenging online. A big part of engagement is that relationship with your student. Once they feel that they know you and they feel comfortable, they you know, they'll feel more comfortable taking risks with their learning and, you know, practicing more and using the language in different ways. So there are some key things that you can learn about your student right from the start. These are things that I think are quite important to know, and you can do this as an interview or a questionnaire. You can send your questions to your student beforehand so they know that what they'll be expected to discuss. But a few of these are things that I think are really key. So obviously their story, their work and life experience. That's really important to get to know that. Another important part of engagement is to find out what their goals are, what they want to learn, what their expectations are, and what they want to get out of the sessions. Working out their skill level is quite important as well. I know that you're given information about what level they are, but if you ask the student about what their strengths and their weaknesses are, and, you know, if they want to concentrate on perhaps speaking or writing or reading, it's good to have that information too. Obviously, finding out what their digital literacy is like as well is important for online communication. Working out their personal environment and any constraints, any barriers to learning is really important as well. Finding out how they like to learn and their interests. So obviously, if you can tap into the students' interests, then, you know, you can plan your tutoring sessions to focus on things that they're interested in. So just moving on now to expectations and setting boundaries. So another important part of keeping your student engaged is establishing what their expectations are. So you need to work out what your student expects from the tutoring sessions. And again, you can do this through an interview or a survey or, you know, a questionnaire. So they might want practice with conversation or maybe help with homework or grammar. But these things are key to engaging your student. If you can find out what your student wants to or needs to improve and establish short-term goals to work towards, that can be key to keeping your student engaged. So they might want to, you know, practice or to write a resume, or perhaps they want to, you know, learn how to have conversations over the phone, or just casual conversations with neighbours, or, you know, more informal language. So once you work out those goals, you can set them and then work towards them. Setting boundaries is also really important because we're all working, you know, our home and work lives are quite blurred at the moment because a lot of us are working from home, and your tutoring sessions will, you know, be done from your house if you're, you know, doing the online tutoring. So definitely set boundaries with your student. Work out what times you're available, and, you know, if there are any other times that, you know, you're available for contact. Think about how much, you know, you'd like to share with your student, and also work out, you know, how much. You know, the students often, if you do develop that, you know, a good relationship, they will potentially share things with you about their personal life, about any issues that they're having. So it's important to keep that in mind and work out, you know, what you can do, or what you should do if you feel like you're taking on too much of maybe some of your students', you know, personal issues. I'm sure Lisa's got some steps in place, you know, of how you can deal with that. But it's really important to be aware of that can happen, and you do need to sometimes step back and, you know, refer the student on to, you know, to a service that can deal with whatever's going on in their life. So just moving on now to activities. So when we think about how to engage students, I think it's really important to keep in mind the learning process. And as you're doing your sessions, if this is always in the back of your mind, it can It can be a focus. So lots of learning, there are lots of theories of learning, but I think the process of absorb, do, connect is a really succinct description of what happens as we learn. And if you can keep this in mind through your sessions, it can sort of help you link each session together and just be aware of what's going on with the student. But basically, the absorb part of learning is, you know, the passive sort of taking in of information. So, for example, if you're explaining the meaning of a word or how it's used, the do part would be your student practicing using that language with you, and the connect is when they go out into the world and use that language in, you know, in the real world, basically. So if you're thinking about that through your sessions, when you if the student learns something with you in that hour in your tutoring session, and then encourage them to go out and use that in the world the next week, and then when you in the follow-up tutor, the session after that one, follow up on that work that you've done in previous sessions and ask them how they used it out in the real world. So just keep that in mind as you're you know, as you're going through your sessions, and I think it can help with you know, engagement. So I mean, this comes down to structure as well. So structure is really important for your student and for engagement. And I referred to setting goals in one of my previous slides. So this can, and also if you're keeping in mind that absorb, do, connect process of learning, if you structure your sessions in this way of having, you know, say small goals in mind for each session, and then giving the student you know, maybe goals to something to, you know, to use that language or whatever you've done in that session, use that language during the week, and then in the next session come back to that one. So you might notice, for example, that maybe your student's not using the past tense correctly. So if you focus on that in your session, that the following session, and then, you know, give them a few, you know, give them some homework to do during the week, and use that language, and then refer back to it in the next session. So that's yeah, a little bit about structure. So another way of engaging your student is to use games. So games are really a great way to engage your student. And, you know, most students really love games. Some of them don't, but you can work that out pretty quickly with your student if they're going to enjoy it or not. And even if you're online classes, you know, when I introduce a game to play, the students, you know, you can feel the energy levels just, you know, going up because they just really enjoy it so much. So you can play, there's lots of online English games out there, and you can play these by sharing your screen with your student. The one that I've been using at the moment is Kahoot. It's really good fun, and the students are really enjoying these games. Someone in the last session I did, someone asked if that or thought that Kahoot was you had to pay for an account, but you can sign up for a free account with Kahoot, and then there are paid. You can, if you want to access further material, you can pay for it. But it's a free website. Another great way of engaging students is to use conversation topics and surveys. And again, there's loads out there. You just have to sort of tap into maybe what your student's interested in. I've got a website there that has links. If you follow this website, there are lots and lots of different conversation topics. Current affairs are another great way of engaging students. Most students are really interested to find out what's going on, you know, in Australian news. So if you can, you know, share your screen, use a newspaper article, or perhaps watch, you know, a news item, again, through sharing your screen, that can be a great way of engaging. I've just got a link there to the ABC Behind the News website. That's a really great one. I use that a lot in my classes. It's aimed at kids, but because the language is quite simple, it's really useful for students who are learning English as well. Another way of engaging students is finding out what kind of what they want to learn in terms of things like grammar. Some students really love learning grammar, and if they do, then you can look at the different things that they want to focus on, and again share your screen and do the activities together. The British Council Learn English website is excellent. It's one I use a lot, and they have online activities that you can do together with your student. So if anyone's got if anyone out there is currently tutoring a student at the moment, you can just write in the chat pod if you've got any other activities or hints that you'd like to add. Okay, so making corrections. So again, corrections can be a really good way of keeping your student engaged. If the student's made aware that there's mistakes they're making, you can work together on correcting them. Making corrections is, I think, really essential, but of course it's really important to not overcorrect or undermine confidence. Again, you can set expectations and correction methods with your student and find out, most students will say that they want to be corrected, but possibly you don't want to be correcting absolutely everything that they're making a mistake with, because it might undermine confidence. You can correct on the spot by repeating back the corrected sentence or the correct pronunciation or vocabulary. But I find that the best thing to do is to take notes while the student's talking and then go over the mistakes. And rather than telling them what the mistake that they've made, you can prompt your student to make the corrections themselves, and often they can do this if they're given time to think about it. You can also correct their writing in this way rather than telling them the answer. Just point out that there's something wrong here and ask them if they can do it. So as I said, some students will respond better to corrections than others, but once you get to know your student, it's pretty easy to find the right balance there. And it's important always, I'd say always encourage your student more than you correct. Often when you're listening to someone speak, you hear the mistakes, you don't necessarily hear the great things that they're producing. So just make sure you take the time to encourage and give them acknowledge the good things they're doing when they're speaking to you. So lastly, before we get into some questions, some homework ideas. So this is a good way of helping keeping your student engaged, and as I was talking about structure and goals before, homework can help with this too. So it's well, first you have to obviously establish if your student wants homework. Often students will say yes they do, but then if you give them something, a worksheet or something that's quite time consuming, they might not necessarily do it or have the time to do it. So if your student does want homework, make it really simple and practical. So a few things that I tell my students to do is to go out and have a conversation with a willing shop assistant. If your student doesn't speak English at home, I tell my students to speak English to their partner, to their friend or the child for 15 minutes every day in English. This can really help them, keep up the English in between your sessions if they're not using English at home. They can eavesdrop on conversations and report back. That can be quite fun. Or watch TV or listen to the radio, make a note of any new vocabulary or phrases to report back. So and ask your students to use. This is again going back to the the structure and that connect part of learning. Ask your student to use any of the new vocabulary that they've learnt, and and then in the next session they need to report back to you and let you know what they've done and how they used it. So I think, finally, so there's a few, these are some really useful websites that I use teaching. So I think Lisa will send you you guys all these slides, so you can just follow the links on the website. Most of this these websites are free. There's a couple where you do have to pay for content, but they have sort of stages. So there's some of the material is free, but then if you want to access more, you do have to pay. But most of those websites up there are free. So I think that's about it. I might just stop sharing my screen now, Lisa, and then I can answer any questions.
Thanks, Rebecca. That's great. Does anyone have any questions for Rebecca? Everyone's very quiet.
Your microphone.
Is everyone muted?
Yes.
Any questions?
Just while people are thinking of them, I just wanted to mention that we have recorded this session and we're going to store this workshop along with future workshops on Better Impact. And Better Impact, for those tutors that have joined our program in the last year, is the volunteer tutor software where you would have uploaded all of your documentation. We're going to, they have an e-learning section there, and we're going to start putting a lot more information for you into that site. So any tutor that's been with us a long time may not have accessed Better Impact before. If you fall into that category, please just send us an email and we can direct you to how you can access Better Impact, and we can help you out with that.
Hi.
Hello,
I had a question.
Yes.
If the student that you all want us to help doesn't have access to computers, so do they actually go? Because I remember years ago, you all used to have an area where people could come and use the facilities there to learn or even type their resumes and stuff like that. Are those facilities still available? Apart from this COVID situation, I understand that.
Yeah. Look, we don't have a specific facility, but we deliver TAFE AMEP across 57 locations in New South Wales, and all TAFE AMEP students are entitled to use any TAFE library. So they're welcome to go to the library where they do have free computers and Wi-Fi, and they would be able to access those computers for instance, connection to you, or they would be able to go and type documents, view things on the internet, or catch up with their homework. They're certainly able to use any of those sites.
Okay. Thanks.
No problem. Thank you.
I had a question.
Yes.
Okay, this might sound a bit daggy. I put it up in the chat box as well. I try and sing in my second language to keep that going, and I'm wondering whether any research backs that singing a language because they're kind of speaking slower might help.
Yes. So sorry, who was that? Is it Jill who's speaking?
I think it's Margaret.
No,
Payton.
Margaret.
Yeah, definitely. Singing is definitely a really great way of, learning language, and it's I think everyone knows you get songs stuck in your head, and advertising jingles stuck in your head. So singing is it's great. We do singing in class sometimes, and it's it's fun. Not all students love it, but definitely if your student likes singing, go for it.
Thank you.
Just something I wanted to mention. My tutee is very up with the internet and so forth, and her problem mainly was in writing, and she put me on to Google Docs. So now I set her exercises or whatever about current affairs or applying for a promotion at work, and we go in there and we can both access it at the same time. So she highlights something and says, what do you mean by that? So it's a really, really terrific way of, I'd never heard of it before, but it's it's a fantastic way of doing it.
A good one as well. Google Classroom, I don't know as well if if you can access that for free, but that's another good a good way of, you know, posting material and posting you know, homework or, you know, links, and then your student can access it and you can, yeah, share it. But it sounds like Google Docs, you've got enough there with Google Docs. So
well, it is, and plus we're talking to each other at the same time. It's not just looking at the paperwork. So no, it's good anyway. I thought it might be handy for people.
Yeah, no, that's good. Yeah, some students just want to concentrate on writing, so that's, you know, that's really good if you can do that.
I've got another question. Maybe it's to do with COVID and my student not getting a lot of, you know, opportunity to speak outside home. But she's asking me more, is my English improving? I feel like it is not improving. And there's a confidence thing. And so I've suggested, why don't you tape yourself, you know, audio record yourself now, put the date, and then in a month's time, have a listen to it, see how you've changed. Or just, I mean, are there any other ways that I mean, I don't want to be, you know, I know how she talks, so I'm kind of clued up now, but people don't always. So, you know, she'll find that.
What level is your student?
Sorry?
What level is your student?
She's, I think, intermediate.
Yeah. So there's this thing, if any of you guys are teachers out there, you'll probably know about this. It's called the intermediate plateau. So students, when they first begin, you know, they learn a lot really, really quickly, and they can feel like this, you know, amazing sort of like, you know, oh, wow, I'm in my class and I'm learning so much and it's great. But then they hit, well, it's the intermediate, they hit a certain level, and then they sort of, so that the language kind of goes up like this, and then it goes like that for a really long time. And it's quite hard to get them up to that, bump them up to that next level. So, yeah, that's probably where your student is at the moment. So tell her that, sorry, I can't remember if it was a her or he. Yeah, tell her that that's really normal part of language learning, and she's maybe hit that plateau, and she might not, you know, recognize or realize that she's, you know, that her language is improving. But yeah, that, I mean, that's a really good way, you know, do a recording, and then you know, go back, you know, when you go, like, do it again in a month or 2 months, and then go back and listen, and they maybe she'll hear the difference. Yeah.
Cool. Thanks.
There's also, I mean, they can do sort of online, you know, they can do online tests and then see what their level is, and then maybe, you know, in 2 months do another test and see if it's changed. That can sort of be a way of quantifying, you know, improvement. But that's hard, that intermediate sort of, yeah.
And are there free tests to do?
Yeah, so British Council has a lot of free online tests and quizzes. There's a level test that they can do with British Council. There's loads of them out there. So, I mean, I think British Council is one of the best ones, best websites. But there's a lot of other ones that they can just get on there and just, you know, do some quizzes and practice and things like that. But also, if you make her aware that that's a you know, that intermediate plateau is, you know, really common, and tell her not to feel discouraged, because her language is always improving. It's just incremental when she's at that level.
Thank you.
Great response. Thanks, Rebecca. That's why we have the expert here. Thank you for that. Appreciate it. Does anyone else have any questions?
Yes, I do.
Yes.
Hi. I just posted a question about songs for beginner learners, and actually I think you wrote about kids' songs and nursery rhymes. I was a bit hesitant about those because I didn't want to feel like I was, you know, kind of talking down to my student, if you like. You know, she's actually a trained lawyer from Russia, and I was conscious about using too many kiddie things.
Yeah, definitely.
Like beginner. So.
Yeah, that's definitely something to be aware of. And also things like, you know, I gave you that website BTN. Always check it before you watch it, because that can sometimes that's really great, but sometimes it is a bit, you know, obviously aimed at young kids, so you don't necessarily want to use that. But with songs, if your student's interested in singing and learning songs, you know, ask her which, you know, artist she likes, and you know, quite often they'll like listening to you know, a song that's popular at the moment, and you know, just doing like a gap fill, a word fill, or you know, looking at the, you know, the you know, what the language in the song, the meaning. So it just depends on what your students, you know, what their interests are. If they're not really interested in singing or learning about, you know, or doing songs, then yeah, don't, just leave it.
Yeah, sure. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Can I just ask, is it possible to have more than one tutee?
Yes, it is. Yes,
do you have a list? Do you have a waiting list, or is it?
We do, but so we have two cohorts of students now. We have our face-to-face students, who are generally a lower level student or a student who's specifically only asked to meet face-to-face.
Yep.
And we have our online students. Now, a face-to-face student and tutor match takes some time. We're trying to match people within a 10 to 15 kilometre radius. As you can imagine, depending on where you live, that's harder to fill at times than for other locations. Online is very easy because we can match you to any corner of New South Wales, and we can match you very quickly. So if you would like another student, just send us an email and we can add that to your profile, and we can start looking for another student for you.
No
so
worries.
thanks for that. Thank you.
No worries. Cheers.
Okay, so thank you so much, everyone. We really appreciate you taking the time today to come along. As I mentioned, we will be having this recording up on Better Impact,